Morning. Is everybody set up? Everybody good? Okay. All right, thank you all for coming this morning. I will read from a brief statement. I'm then going to play a video footage. Then I will open up the floor for any questions. On Friday, February 24th, it was brought to the attention of the Internal Affairs Division that an inmate housed at the Charles B. Webster Detention Center filed a grievance for unnecessary force used against him by deputies that occurred on Thursday, February 23rd. The Detention Center Intelligence Division investigated the complaint and found video of two deputies, Gerardo Sanchez Jr. and Joshua Jackson, assaulting the inmate. The case was immediately forwarded to the Criminal Investigations Division, where a criminal investigation began. The investigation subsequently led to the arrest, warrants being issued on Tuesday, February 28th. Sanchez and Jackson were taken into custody and booked into the detention center. An internal affairs investigation was also conducted, which led to both deputies being terminated. In the video you're about to see, two deputies respond to what was put out as an emergency medical assistance call. When they arrived, they found the inmate, who had a history of faking medical calls, lying on the floor. I warn you that the footage is graphic and may not be suitable for some viewers. If you direct your attention to the screen, the television monitor, we'll play the video. Here at the Richmond County Sheriff's Office, we feel that no one is above the law. And while we take no pride in locking up one of our own, we would not hesitate to do so if the situation warrants it. Prior to this incident, over the last year, 12 Richmond County deputies have been arrested. Some for domestic incidents, some for illegal contraband, some for statutory crimes. However, 6 were for excessive force. Even though our deputies respond to well over 400,000 calls a year, and we house over 1,100 inmates on a daily basis, the use of excessive force is never warranted and will not be tolerated. As the leader of this agency, this responsibility falls on me. I have directed the senior leadership of this agency to identify any gaps in training or culture that may have contributed to this many incidents. We've also consulted with our in-house counselor to see if we can identify any warning signs that may have been missed or that we can take a look at to identify if a deputy may be in crisis or going through personal issues. 99% of our employees come to work every day and lay it all on the line, and I am extremely proud of them and the work that they do. While I take full accountability, I only ask that the citizens of this county do not judge the loyalty and passion of that 99% off the selfish and misguided actions of a few individuals. We will continue to strive to become the best law enforcement agencies in the state, but when we fall short, I can assure you that we will own our mistakes, take corrective actions, and get right back in the fight to make this city as safe as possible. I take any questions that you have.
You've worked to build a better relationship with the community through the sheriff's office. How do you think something like this will affect that?
Well, one, by coming out and acknowledging our mistakes and seeing that we do have a problem, an issue. Again, of those incidents, some of those were domestic in nature and not related to the job, but again, when you have 8 use for excessive force, that shows that we have to go back and look at something that we're missing, and that's what we're doing. As we reflect, I've been sheriff for 10 years. You have to go back periodically and go back and say, what can we do better? We can't be complacent. This is a wake-up call for us, a wake-up call for our 700 plus other employees that, one, this kind of behavior is not our culture, is not our way. And then we got to go back and see if we can add tools that we can help alleviate and this from happening again.
You said this is a wake-up call for you. Why was this incident the one that kind of pushed you guys over the edge to come forward and make some of those changes?
Well, when we look at, again, prior to this, like I said, we had 12. Some of them, like I said, half of those were off-duty incidents. But in this particular case, when you talk about excessive force, you look at it in two atmospheres. One is when, let's say, a person is justified in using force on an actively resisting suspect, and once that suspect is subdued, in that moment, they go just a little bit too far. That is a violation of policy because they were justified in using force, but they stayed in the moment just a little bit too long. The criminal use of force, excessive use of force, is one, when the subject is in custody and not actively resisting, and then two, when the suspect and the deputy in the assault is totally unrevoked. And as you saw from the video, they were carrying this individual. He was not actively resisting in any way, and for some reason, they decided to stop and physically assault this individual, which was totally unprovoked. Now, whether he was making derogatory comments or not, that's to be disputed, but that is not enough to lay hands, as you saw from the video. And that's what got us to the fact that if just pure verbal abuse could cause an individual to react in that nature, then something we need to go back and either revisit our training or to see if there's some trigger factors that we're missing with our employees.
And how can you, as a sheriff, make sure that those complaints from inmates or everyday citizens are addressed and looked at in its full capacity?
And that's what we're doing. The things about it is that we need to be made aware of the complaint. I will use your story that you aired on Monday. The fact that when we were made aware of the complaint, we immediately looked at it. The victim in that case went to the media, and sometimes people go to the media and social media, and they never come to us with the complaint. So we never know about it. So our thing is, if these complaints are made aware to us, we're going to investigate every complaint and give an answer. And like I say, we're in the era of video. All our deputies wear body cameras. We have cameras throughout the jail. So most of the incidents that we are involved in are going to be captured in some form or fashion. So it gives us an opportunity to go back and evaluate and look at those if we're made aware of them. And that's what we encourage people to do that. And I say it so many times that social media is a great tool, but that is not where you air your grievances. Come to us and let us know what is going on, so if there is a pattern, we can identify it more quickly.
Well, there was a complaint that turned up on social media about an assault alleged by Deputy Josh Jackson against Mr. Boyd, and that maybe wasn't followed up on. Do you know anything about that?
Again, you just make my point. We don't scour social media looking for complaints. They have to make the complaint. We have an Internal Affairs Investigation Division. We have a complaint on our website that you can file a larger formal complaint. And we encourage people, if you have a complaint or you have a legitimate concern, to contact us directly, and we will make a record of that complaint and investigate it and come up with a disposition.
If you said, I apologize, what injuries did the inmate sustain from
They-
the incident?
They were superficial. They didn't require any medical attention.
Are you losing officers and harming recruiting efforts with the number of deputies that you have being city fired?
Repeat that for me, please.
Is this harming your recruiting efforts, and are you losing officers as a result of all these arrests?
No, the recruiting efforts have been harmed for the last couple of years. As you know, all agencies throughout the nation are facing shortages of qualified candidates in law enforcement. And a lot of it is because of the national narrative. Like I say, in this particular case, it's not hurting our recruiting efforts because these deputies violated the law. They did wrong. They had nothing to do with their job. It's the fact that they violated the law. So again, when I got 700 plus employees, like I say, 99% of those come to work and do their job, and they're happy about doing it. You just have a handful of few who takes it too far and have to face those consequences. But we're always trying to recruit great individuals, great employees. But all we're saying in this particular case is that we're going to hold our employees accountable. And every person that we hire, and I sit across and I tell them, we make no mistakes. We will not protect our own if you violate the law. And we have that conversation. So I'm at peace when we go through this, because I have this conversation with them and tell them that we're not going to tolerate you violating the law or violating anyone's rights, not at this agency.
Have you had to lower your standards in hiring, and or might the short staffing issues be contributing to other issues with your employees to where they, maybe aren't handling the workload like they need to?
Well, it's a two-part question. One, we definitely haven't lowered our standards. Again, in law enforcement, and what people have to understand when you talk about qualified candidates, getting in law enforcement is a little different in working in the private sector, where you have to go through different things. We have to take psychological tests, we have to take polygraphs, backgrounds, multiple interview sessions. So it is a lot to go through to be in law enforcement because of the sensitive nature of that. Now, when it comes to when you're talking about shortages, of course, anytime that you have shortages and people have to work longer or harder, that affects morale. But again, we have found ways to mitigate that with overtime compensation, bringing in people from, especially let's say in the detention center, we bring in people from our operations side to go work the jail. We bring people from our community service division to go help out from different divisions that go and fill that gap, to let them know that we understand that sometimes you may be shorthanded, but it's not going to be that always, because we're continuing to recruit, we're continuing to hire. Just right now, we're able to, we were very short in our jail, and now we've got those staffing numbers up where we no longer have to supplement them with people from the road patrol coming in to fill in. And we had to do that for about several months to fill that gap. Now we're at a point where we can leave those individuals back in operation. So we're continuing to strive and let them know that we're trying to fix the problem. We're continuing to hire. We have interviews. Again, this week there's potential hires that we have. So this is an ongoing process. This is never something that you can just sit still with and say we're where we need to be and we're fully capacity, because that's never going to be the case. Because people are going to, in law enforcement, people are going to always migrate in and out of law enforcement. I've been in for 30 years, and that's always been the trend.
You said you were going to go back and look at gaps in training. In your words, how heavily do you instill training of these ethics on your employees whenever they're first hired?
It's huge. But again, I think when I say the gaps in training, is the fact that we may not follow up enough. We instill it, we teach it, we tell the culture, but looking at it and talking to our in-house counselor, maybe this needs to be reinforced a lot more than in service once a year, twice a year. It's kind of like firearms training, where, by the state, you're only required to go once a year for firearms training. And I would tell anybody that you can't be proficient firing your weapon one time a year for qualifying. So what we did was open up our range every Friday, so anybody with our agency can go and practice every Friday for proficiency training. And I think the same thing is going to have to apply for the ethics, for the culture, for the reinforcing the values, that we're going to have to put something in place that we go back and keep reinforcing our core values, that this is the kind of agency we want to be. Will not be tolerated at this agency, because it's kind of like, you know, you look at it as a parent when you allow your kids so much latitude that they will wander off and get into things they didn't unless you really keep reinforcing your core values. And I think that's one of the things that we definitely need to look at, that going back and reinforcing those a lot more than we're doing. Because we're doing the training, but I think we're just not reinforcing it enough. And that's something that we have to instill in our training, or in our musters, or when we meet every month, or just to come up with some kind of programs, or check in with our counselor where we mandatorily make them check in on a periodic basis. So we're looking at all of those things to try to fill that gap.
Do you know when we could expect to see something implemented that could help with something like this?
We're trying to do it within the next 30 days. Like I said, our counselor has already put in a program where she was planning to meet this year with every single deputy of this agency for a 30-minute session, which we thought when we implemented that last year going into this year, saying this is something we want to do. So, but you're talking about 700 plus employees. It's going to take about 3 months to get them all in. But now that when we look at it, maybe that one-time 30-minute check-in is not going to be enough. So now maybe we need to come up with something else where we have some smaller sessions, maybe once a month, where we bring people in and do a 15-minute check-in or 20-minute just check-in session with them. So these are things we're looking at now to try to implement within the next 30 days.
Can you go into more detail on the protocols being put into place at the jail specifically to prevent this kind of thing from happening again?
Well, this particular part was not a protocol issue. This is something where, again, two deputies, and at some point in their mentality, felt it was okay that they could just physically assault an inmate, whether he was verbally abusing them or not. Now, one thing I will tell you is that through some of the interviews that we've got, some of the responses that we get that we take to heart is their response is, you don't know what it's like to be in here. So now we got to look at that culture of being that 12 hours, because you have to remember, the inmate is incarcerated for 24 hours a day. That jailer is in that environment for at least 12 hours a day, every day that they work. So we got to look at to see what toll that plays on them. So this is not a procedure or policy manual, because we had two deputies. We don't ever want them to enter with just one. So we had two. But again, at some point, something in these individuals felt a need to physically assault this individual unprovoked. So that's not a policy issue. Again, that is something we have to look at as far as when I say either cultural or gap in training issue. Any other questions?
With Chief Deputy Clayton announcing his retirement next year, do you plan to run again this year?
Well, we're way off topic on that, but let's get through the end of this year first. Right now, my concentration on one, again, assuring the public that we're going to be transparent, we're going to be open, we're going to admit to our mistakes. And, you know, the other part that I look at it as, when people say, well, that's a lot of arrests for deputies, you know, we are 700 plus man agency. And not saying that this happens in every agency, but the fact is that in some agencies, this is not handled the way we're handling it. They choose to handle it internally or some other way, but we choose, if it's a criminal violation, that we have no problems levying criminal charges. So that's our main focus now, especially, like I say, for the next 30 days and throughout the end of this year. And then we'll address next year when next year comes. Any other questions?
What is the complaint process? You say that they can report something on your website. What happens after that?
You talking about a regular citizen, or you talking about inmate?
Yeah.
Or inmate?
Either
Right.
one.
Well, it's two. Inmates have the kiosk that they can go and file a complaint, which happened in this case, where we have a grievance officer that looks into it and enforces it. A regular citizen, they have a complaint for, let's say it was a traffic stop or any other thing. They can either call our Internal Affairs Division directly. They can come down to the sheriff's office and file a complaint. or they can go on our website and they file a complaint where it says file a complaint. We get that, it goes to internal affairs, it's vetted, and either based on the complaint, is either farmed out to the division where it handled. Let's say if it's a traffic stop, it may go to that traffic supervisor to look at. But if it's an internal or a criminal investigation, then it go to our criminal investigation division, and we'll see how we handle it that way. But we vet every one of them, and then we have a disposition within our internal affairs division that shows the disposition of every complaint, whether it was unfounded, whether it was substantiated, whether it led to criminal charges. So we have a record of that. So every one of them, you will see a disposition if you filed a complaint, even if it was unfounded, unwarranted. Anything else? We will make sure that you all get, your stations get a digital copy of the video. Again, I just ask if you do play it, that you do it with the warning about the graphic nature of it. And like I say, the only reason we wanted to show that, and I know it was graphic, just wanted to show you exactly what we were dealing with, exactly what we saw, that we found it to be extremely egregious. I found it disheartening when I saw it, and I thought it was important that the public understands what we're going through and what we saw and why we took the actions that we took so quickly. Any other questions?
Is there a process for a deputy or jailer to report another deputy or jailer for something like this?
See, that's an excellent question. That's one of the things that we have been now that we're, in the last 6 months that we've really been pushing is duty to intervene. Because we've seen so many times where if a deputy saw another deputy losing somewhat of control, if they would have stepped in and intervened, that it probably could have saved that deputy's career. And that's what we're trying to get them to understand, that this mentality of, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, it's the fact that we tell them that you very well may be saving their career or keeping them from getting locked up. One of the use of force incidents that I talked about, when 3 deputies we locked up at the same time for one incident in the jail. One of them involved a deputy merely, 2 deputies were going down to the floor to an assault an inmate, and they needed him, the 3rd deputy who was in the tower, to punch the door so they can get into the cell. If that deputy would have just refused and say, look, this has gone too far, let some cooler heads prevail, all 3 of them would still be employed now. There may have been some disciplinary action, but they wouldn't have a criminal record, and they probably still would have been employed if he just wouldn't have hit that button and let them go in. And that's what we're trying to tell them, that a lot of times you're saving their career. You're not getting them into trouble. You're saving their career, and that's what we're trying to get them to do, for a duty to intervene when they see that a deputy is losing. Because again, this is a tough job, and people have some emotional baggage, and some people come to work, and just like you all are human, when you come here, we don't know what your personal situation was before you showed up to work today. We don't know how your last night went. Same thing with deputies. So when they come to work, they may take their emotional baggage to work with them, and they may need to take a moment. It's up for the other deputy to watch them, to see them, and to say, hey, you might need to take a break, or you may need to leave or step back from the situation. And we're encouraging that every day, to tell them the duty to intervene, that you very well may be saving them. You're not hurting them, you're saving them. And that's what we want more of. Any other questions? All right. Now, thank y'all. Like I said, I'll make sure y'all get a digital hard copy of the video. So thank y'all so very much for coming this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. I've done it more than I don't
Not
know.
for this video, but later I can get on our computer out there.
Okay,
Figure it out.
email the video. Okay, so it's good. Very soon.
Yeah, so we have to
So you
convert it
can-
to an MP4 and then we can change it
Okay.
and add the